The tragedy of Steven Tyler is not that he lost his voice. The tragedy is that he spent his entire life screaming on stage to drown out everything that was silently shattering behind him. We remember the explosive energy, the scarves flying on the mic stand, and the untamable monster that turned rock and roll into a religious ritual of flesh and blood. What we rarely stop to think about is what that scream was really trying to bury. They called him the Demon of Screamin, a nickname earned through his ferocious vocals. 4 Grammy Awards, a place in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, over 150 million records sold, the most extraordinary comeback in music history. Aerosmith's frontman didn't just play rock, he merged into it with a reckless, desperate, all-consuming fervor that made every night on stage look like the last thing he would ever do in life. But behind that wall of sound, behind the skin and glitter and the primal roar that shook stadiums across 6 continents, was a man who could not stop destroying himself. Decades of heroin, cocaine, painkillers, 4 rehab stints, each followed by a relapse that pulled him deeper than before, 2 marriages that ended in ruins. 11 years completely absent from his biological daughter's life, the child who grew up believing another man was her father. Sexual assault allegations against underage girls, presented in lawsuits that quoted directly from his own memoir. And finally, at age 75, a broken larynx silenced the most famous scream in rock history permanently, irreversibly, with no appeal. The world gave Steven Tyler everything a human being could receive, and he spent half his life racing against a darkness that no stage lights could reach and no applause could extinguish. The stage has gone dark. The farewell tour was canceled before it could even begin. The Demon of Screamin stands at age 78 with a voice that can no longer carry across a room, a body etched with the marks of every fall, and a legacy so tangled that no simple words can contain it. How does a man who once made millions feel more alive than ever spend decade after decade trying to choke something inside himself that refused to die? At age 78, the face behind the microphone tells a story that the music never could. Before looking through the legend to find the man who survived, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like for Steven Tyler. Steven Victor Tallarico was born on March 26, 1948, at Stuyvesant Polyclinic Hospital in Manhattan, New York. His mother, Susan Ray Blancha, was an office secretary. His father, Victor Alphonse Tallarico, born in 1916, was a classically trained musician who studied at Juilliard for 8 years. Won a gold medal at Carnegie Hall in 1937 performing with John Dembeck, and played piano alongside greats like Ella Fitzgerald, Lena Horne, Oscar Peterson, and Mel Torme. Victor led the music department at Cardinal Spellman High School in the Bronx for 15 years. In the Tallarico household, music was not a hobby, it was the air they breathed. Victor began learning piano at 3.5 years old under the guidance of his mother, Steven's grandmother, who was also a piano teacher. His grandfather played cello and tenor saxophone. 3 generations of musicians created this child before he even understood who he was. At age 3, the family moved from Manhattan to the Bronx. In 1957, when he was 9, they moved to 100 Pembroke Drive in the northeast section of Yonkers. It was here, in a quiet New York suburb, that the tension between 2 musical worlds began to form. Victor wanted his son to follow classical music, the path of discipline and precision that he had walked his whole life. Years later, Victor recalled telling his son, "Steven, you can play rock and roll on the weekends, but get a decent job." But Steven didn't hear Chopin in his head. He heard drum beats, distorted guitars, and the sweet chaos of rock and roll exploding across America. At age 17, he went to Greenwich Village in New York and saw a Rolling Stones performance. He looked at Mick Jagger on stage and realized they shared unusually thick lips, but more importantly, he realized what he wanted to become. Not a pianist in his father's orchestra, but the monster on the rock stage. Even so, Victor was the first to recognize his son's innate musical talent, though he never fully accepted the path the boy chose. Steven started playing drums very early, and the feeling of being allowed to make noise, to hit, to release everything inside by striking the drum skin, was the closest the anxious boy had ever come to freedom. For the first time, his difference was no longer a flaw but became a strength. But school didn't agree. Steven attended Walt Whitman Junior High and then Roosevelt High School, located at the corner of Tuckahoe Road in Yonkers. In 1967, he was expelled from Roosevelt for using marijuana. Not because he lacked intelligence, but because he could not and would not exist in a system that required sitting still, complying, and waiting. The system had no slot for him, so the system pushed him out. After that, Steven transferred to Jose Quintano's School for Young Professionals, where he finally earned his diploma. But his real classroom was never within four walls. In 1964, at just 16 and still at Roosevelt, Steven formed his first band called The Strangers, initially named The Strangers, but changed because another group already used that name. The band consisted of Steven on lead vocals and harmonica, Peter Stahl on guitar, Alan Stromae on bass, Don Solomon on keyboards and backing vocals, and Barry Shapiro on drums. After lineup changes, the group renamed to Chain Reaction. They performed around Yonkers and Sunapee, New Hampshire, where the Tallarico family often vacationed. In 1966, at age 18, Chain Reaction entered the studio and recorded 4 songs, releasing 2 singles, The Sun paired with When I Needed You, on Date Records. The band also opened for the Beach Boys at Iona College in New Rochelle, and opened for both the Beards and the Yardbirds between 1967 and 1968. It wasn't major success, but it was the first time Steven stood in front of a crowd and felt what normal life never gave him: control. On stage, whether a small club stage or a college auditorium, he decided the rhythm, he decided the energy, he decided when the crowd fell silent and when they exploded. On stage, no one kicked him out. Stepping off stage, everything went back to the way it was. The insecurity, the disorientation, the feeling of not belonging anywhere except under the lights. That pattern formed right from his teenage years and would never change over the next 6 decades. It was also during this time, in the mid-1960s, that Steven began using marijuana, which was exactly why he was expelled from Roosevelt. There was nothing dramatic about it. No moment of collapse. Just a teenager finding a second escape. The stage was escape number 1, where inner chaos was transformed into art and control. Drugs were escape number 2, where the chaos was simply switched off, without needing to transform into anything. Both escapes would stay with him for the rest of his life, the first one saving him and the second nearly killing him, sometimes on the same night. Before Aerosmith was born, before any record label knew his name, Steven had already written a song that would later become one of the most immortal rock songs of the 20th century, Dream On. A high school dropout teenager from Yonkers had written about dreams and their fragility before his own life had a chance to prove the song right word for word. In the summer of 1969, in the small resort town of Sunapee in New Hampshire, where the Tallarico family often vacationed, 21-year-old Steven went to see a local music show and for the first time saw Joe Perry playing guitar in the band Jam Band with bassist Tom Hamilton. Perry was working at a local restaurant at the time, washing dishes, cooking French fries, and sweeping floors to make a living. But when he picked up the guitar, Steven saw what he couldn't find in anyone in Chain Reaction. Real fire, the kind of fire that didn't need teaching and couldn't be put out. In October 1970, Perry and Hamilton drove a hippie van up to Sunapee for a lakeside party and ran into Steven again. When they told him about the apartment in Boston and the plan to form a band, Steven immediately wanted to join with one condition only. He wouldn't play drums anymore. He would only accept the frontman position. Tom Hamilton later recounted in the book Walk This Way, the autobiography of Aerosmith, that Steven was drawn to Joe's fire, while Perry was drawn to Steven's perfectionism and song-arranging ability. Steven moved into the second-floor apartment at 1325 Commonwealth Avenue in the Allston neighborhood of Boston. Joey Kramer, a friend from New York days, was called in to be the drummer, and it was Kramer who came up with the name Aerosmith, a word he used to doodle in his notebooks during high school for no clear reason. Brad Whitford replaced guitarist Ray Tabano in 1971, completing the lineup. The 5 band members lived together in that cramped apartment from 1970 to 1972, sharing every meal, rehearsing in the basement of the Boston University Women's Dorm at 500 Commonwealth Avenue, and according to Steven, they always ended rehearsal before 4:30 in the afternoon to get home in time to watch the Three Stooges at 5. Tyler and Perry wrote their first song together, Movin' Out, on a waterbed in the living room of the apartment. That shared poverty would become the greatest luxury they would never be able to buy back once they became rich. After 2 years playing clubs across Massachusetts and New York, Aerosmith signed with Columbia Records in 1972. The debut album, titled Aerosmith, was released on January 5, 1973, recorded at Intermedia Studio in Boston, and only reached position 166 on the charts. The first single, Dream On, the song Steven wrote as a teenager, was released on June 27, 1973, and only peaked at number 59 on the Billboard Hot 100. The song about dreams and their unbearable fragility went unheard, but in Boston it was the #1 song of the year on WBZ-FM. The city had heard it before the rest of the country had a chance to turn around. The band built a fan base by touring non-stop, opening for The Kinks, Mott the Hoople, Sha Na Na. The second album, Get Your Wings, came out in March 1974 and stayed on the charts for 86 weeks. Then everything exploded. Toys in the Attic was released on April 8, 1975, selling over 10 million copies. Sweet Emotion and Walk This Way became anthems, the latter remixed by Run DMC. In 1986, as the first bridge between rock and hip-hop in music history, Rocks followed in 1976, selling over 5 million copies. Aerosmith no longer opened for anyone. They were the main stage. And on that main stage, Steven Tyler turned himself into something no one had seen before. He jumped, he spun, he wrapped scarves around the mic stand and turned them into icons. He screamed with a voice so wide that Rolling Stone later ranked him among the 100 greatest singers of all time, and Hit Parader placed him at number 3 on the list of 100 top metal vocalists. The nickname the Demon of Screamin spread across America. When Dream On was re-released at the end of 1975, it climbed to number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100. The country finally heard what Boston had heard 2 years earlier. But parallel to every rung of glory, there was a heavier drug dose than the last. Steven and Joe sank deeper into cocaine, heroin, alcohol, all mixed into a cocktail of destruction. The press dubbed them the Toxic Twins. Tom Hamilton recalled, "We had reached a very dangerous point where we had enough money to buy every bad habit we wanted." Brad Whitford remembered the scene in the dressing room after shows. Chairs flying, things being thrown, the two tearing each other apart. He had to grab his stuff and go change anywhere else because he didn't dare stay in the room. The two people who had just created the greatest music of their lives were also destroying each other in a way no one could intervene. Steven believed drugs were the fuel of creativity, that he needed heroin to write music and cocaine to perform. That belief would take 10 years and multiple near-death experiences to shatter. The breaking point came in the summer of 1979 at the World Series of Rock in Cleveland, Ohio. Conflict erupted between Steven and Alyssa, Joe Perry's wife. The result: Perry quit Aerosmith on the spot, left the tour, and never came back. This was the first divorce of the Toxic Twins. Steven later admitted that Joe's departure devastated him, but the addiction at that time had distorted his perception so much that he couldn't see his own responsibility. The band replaced Perry with Jimmy Crespo, and when Whitford also left the group in 1981, Rick Dufay stepped in. The album Rock in a Hard Place was released on August 27, 1982, with a recording cost of $1.5 million, only reaching position 32 on the charts and selling over 1 million copies, disastrous compared to the 10 million of Toys in the Attic. Steven performed in a completely wasted state, forgetting lyrics on stage, staggering. The band that once sold out stadiums now couldn't fill clubs. No one called them the Toxic Twins anymore. The music industry had already written their obituary. What no one expected was that the greatest chapter in the Aerosmith story had not yet been written, and to write it, Steven Tyler had to face what he feared most: silence. In 1984, Steven Tyler entered rehab for the first time. He didn't understand why he was there. In 1986, he entered for the second time. Still didn't understand. He told Hot Living magazine many years later, "There was no such thing as a rehab center back then, just psychiatric hospitals. I went in 84 and 86, and I didn't really get it. The early 80s were horrible. Drugs were dragging us down." But even before Tyler got sober, Joe Perry had come back. In 1984, the Toxic Twins reunited, along with Brad Whitford returning to replace Rick Dufay. The original Aerosmith lineup was restored for the first time in 5 years, but both main souls of the band were still drowning in addiction. The album Done with Mirrors was released in 1985 and was a commercial failure, selling less than 1 million copies. The world was not yet ready to believe in the comeback when the evidence was still not convincing enough. The real turning point came in 1986, not from the studio but from an unexpected meeting. Producer Rick Rubin convinced the hip-hop group Run DMC to re-record the song Walk This Way with Tyler and Perry. The result was one of the most important moments in popular music history. The first time rock met hip-hop on MTV. The first time two seemingly irreconcilable music worlds stood together on one stage. The music video with the image of Tyler smashing through the wall separating the two studios, one rock and one rap, became a cultural icon. The song reached the top 4 on the Billboard Hot 100, introducing Aerosmith to an entire new generation that had never heard their name. And more important than any chart position, it proved Steven Tyler was not a relic of the 70s trying to cling to the past. He was a pioneer rewriting the future. In 1988, what had to happen finally happened. The band's management and members staged an intervention, forcing Tyler into rehab for the 3rd time. He was furious. They thought if they just got the lead singer sober, all the problems would disappear. I got sober, and it took me years to stop being angry about being pushed into rehab while they went on vacation. But this time, the silence was no longer a sentence. It became a foundation. For the first time in his life, Steven Tyler had to exist without the stage, without drugs, without any noise to cover up what was inside. And what he discovered in that stillness changed everything. He could write better music, sing stronger, create more sharply when sober. The belief that drugs were the fuel of genius, the belief that had held him captive for 15 years, was shattered by the very music he created after rehab. Permanent Vacation was released on August 18, 1987, and sold over 7 million copies, spawning 3 top 20 singles. The band the whole world had written an obituary for suddenly came back stronger than any previous version. 2 years later, Pump debuted in 1989 and pushed Aerosmith to a height they had never reached even in their 70s heyday. Love in an Elevator became the first Aerosmith song to hit #1 on the mainstream rock chart. And then came Janny's Got a Gun, a song about a girl abused by her biological father who picks up a gun to shoot back at the one who destroyed her childhood. The song brought Aerosmith their first Grammy in 1990 in the category Best Rock Performance by a Duo or Group with Vocal. Steven Tyler sang about the pain of abused children with a heartbreaking voice that made all of America stop and listen. The 1990s belonged to Aerosmith in a way no other rock band could compete for. They dominated MTV with music videos that became cultural phenomena. Cryin', Amazing, and Crazy, all 3 featuring young actress Alicia Silverstone, turned Aerosmith from a rock band into a cross-generational pop icon. Tyler was no longer just a rock singer. He was a television star, a face on every magazine, a man that both men and women wanted to be or be with. His stage expanded from concert venues to the entire pop culture. The album Get a Grip was released in 1993 and sold over 20 million copies worldwide, earning 2 more Grammys for Livin' on the Edge and Crazy. Metal Edge voted it Album of the Year. Aerosmith didn't just come back. They surpassed their own 70s peak without a drop of heroin. The album 9 Lives followed in 1997, topping the Billboard 200, and the single Pink won yet another Grammy. But the real emotional peak of the entire comeback was not in any award. It was in one single song and the accompanying movie. In 1998, Aerosmith recorded I Don't Want to Miss a Thing for director Michael Bay's blockbuster film Armageddon, a song written by Diane Warren. The film is about a father who sacrifices his life to save the world and has to say goodbye to his daughter. The role of the daughter was played by Liv Tyler, Steven's biological daughter, the girl he had been completely absent from for the first 11 years of her life because of addiction, to the point that no one dared entrust her to him. Steven Tyler stood in front of the microphone and sang I Don't Want to Miss a Thing, while on the big screen, his own daughter cried, saying goodbye to her father. The song held #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 4 consecutive weeks, becoming the biggest hit of Aerosmith's entire career. But it wasn't just a commercial peak. It was the deepest personal confession Steven Tyler had ever uttered. The man who had missed the first 11 years of his daughter's life now sang about the fear of missing anything. And the whole world admired and choked up without knowing that every note in that song carried the weight of real regret. In 2001, Aerosmith was officially inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Steven Tyler stood next to Joe Perry on the stage, the two toxic twins who had gone from the cramped apartment at 1325 Commonwealth Avenue to the most sacred temple of rock and roll. 31 years, tens of millions of records sold, 4 Grammys, 8 American Music Awards, 12 MTV Video Music Awards, and a comeback that no one in the music industry believed could happen. After 12 years sober, the body delivered its first betrayal. In the early 2000s, Tyler had to undergo foot surgery to treat Morton's neuroma, a chronic painful condition in the ball of the foot after decades of jumping around on stage. The doctor prescribed opioid painkillers. The irony was that this time, it wasn't rock and roll culture pulling him down, not heroin backstage or cocaine on the mirror. This time, it was the healthcare system, prescription medication, white pills in plastic bottles labeled by doctors. Addiction returned wearing a legal face, and because it was legal, it was harder to recognize and destroyed more slowly. Then in 2003, darkness from a more distant past came calling. Tyler was diagnosed with hepatitis C, a legacy of the needle-using period in the 70s. He stayed silent for 3 years before going public in 2006, telling Access Hollywood, "I've had hepatitis C for a long time, asymptomatic. The doctor said now is the time to treat it, 11 months of chemotherapy. I did it and it nearly killed me." 11 months of chemotherapy while addicted to painkillers and while his second marriage was collapsing. Teresa Barrick, the woman who had been by his side for 18 years, mother of Chelsea and Taj, announced separation in 2005 and finalized the divorce in 2006. Health, marriage, and sobriety, the 3 pillars he took more than a decade of rehab to build, collapsed at the same time in the same year. Also in 2006, a blood vessel in Tyler's throat burst during a performance. He had to undergo vocal cord surgery. For the first time, his body warned that his voice, the weapon that defined his entire being, was not immortal. Tyler finished surgery and continued singing. He ignored the warning. 3 years later, on August 5, 2009, at an outdoor concert in Sturgis, South Dakota, he slipped and fell off the edge of the stage during Love in an Elevator. Broken left shoulder, 20 stitches on his head, helicopter to the hospital. Aerosmith canceled the entire summer tour. The injury required painkillers. Painkillers required higher doses. Higher doses required even more. And the familiar spiral returned with cruel precision. In December 2009, Tyler voluntarily entered the Betty Ford rehab facility. This time, he wasn't angry like in 1988. This time, he understood that sobriety was not a one-time victory, but a daily battle for the rest of his life. In November 2011, the body struck for the 3rd time. Tyler fell in a hotel bathroom in Paraguay, breaking 2 teeth and requiring stitches on his face. He told NBC he had food poisoning and passed out while showering. With his history, the whole world suspected. Tyler had to publicly affirm he was sober and admit, "I understand why people think that. It still bothers me, but that's something I have to deal with for the rest of my life." Even when sober, the body still betrayed him, and the world still didn't believe. Between the falls, Tyler tried to reinvent himself. On January 19, 2011, he appeared for the first time as a judge on the 10th season of American Idol, sitting next to Jennifer Lopez and Randy Jackson. 2 television seasons, mixed reactions, rock fans disappointed that the Demon of Screamin was now judging teenagers singing live on air. But Tyler found a new stage while the old one was gradually closing. In 2016, he released his solo country album, We're All Somebody from Somewhere, which reached #1 on the U.S. Top Country Albums chart. The rock singer, turning to country at age 68, proved he could still create outside his comfort zone, but also showed he was searching for a new identity as the old one faded. Then in 2022, the cruelest pattern repeated for the final time. Tyler had to undergo foot surgery again to prepare his body for the Deuces Are Wild residency in Las Vegas. Again the foot. Again opioids. Again the spiral. Aerosmith issued a statement in May. Our beloved brother Steven has worked hard on his sobriety for many years. After foot surgery and the need to manage pain during that process, he recently relapsed and voluntarily entered an inpatient treatment program. The June and July shows were canceled. Tyler stayed in the rehab facility 30 days longer than planned because he wanted to be completely sure before stepping out. 4 rehabs in 4 decades. Each time the body healed, the mind collapsed. Throat in 2006, shoulder and head in 2009, face and teeth in 2011, foot in 2022. The body was sending its final warning. But Steven Tyler, the man who had survived heroin, cocaine, and 4 rehabs, was about to face an enemy he could not outrun, outscream, or outlive. Aerosmith announced Peace Out, the farewell tour in 2023, 40 shows across North America, intended as a fitting goodbye for over 50 years of career. Fans bought tickets as if this was the last chance to stand in the same room with the Demon of Screamin. The first 3 shows went smoothly. Then came the 4th night. On September 10, 2023, at a stage in Long Island, New York, 75-year-old Steven Tyler was performing when his voice began to break. Not the kind of break that any singer experiences after several consecutive nights of performing, but something deeper, something structural, something broken. His larynx was fractured, literally broken, right in the middle of the show. He wrote to fans right after, "I am heartbroken to say that I received strict doctor's orders not to sing for the next 30 days. I have broken blood vessels in my vocal cords." But the reality was far more serious than what he said. Doctors later confirmed this was a laryngeal fracture injury accompanied by vocal cord damage. Medically, after about age 30, the laryngeal cartilage gradually ossifies, becoming brittle and more prone to fracture under impact. For Steven Tyler, who had been screaming professionally for 59 years since the founding of the Strangers in 1964, his larynx had endured pressure that no part of the human body was designed to withstand for such a long time. This was not an accident. This was the inevitable consequence of a lifetime of screaming, the final bill that the body sent after half a century and finally refused to extend credit for even one more day. The following months were the quietest in Steven Tyler's life. He spent time trying to recover his voice with the best medical team money could buy, trying every method, every treatment. For the first time in his life, he was forced to be silent, not by choice, but by compulsion. The previous silences had all been chosen by him or imposed indirectly. Silence in rehab rooms, silence after divorces, silence of regret. But this time, his own body forbade him from producing sound. The man defined by noise was stripped of the right to create it. The microphone was still there, the scarves still hung on the mic stand, but no one was singing. The farewell tour was postponed to 2024, and fans waited with the fragile hope that only those who love rock and roll can understand. Then on August 2, 2024, Aerosmith issued a statement on their official website and on social media. Every word carried the weight of a final verdict. As you know, Steven's voice is an instrument like no other. He has spent many months tirelessly working to get his voice back to where it was before the injury. We have watched him struggle despite having the best medical team by his side. Sadly, it is clear that a full recovery from the vocal injury is not possible. We have made the painful and difficult but necessary decision, as a band of brothers, to retire from the touring stage. 54 years, 15 studio albums, over 150 million records sold. And one sentence, a full recovery is not possible. Joe Perry, the remaining toxic twin, who had been with Tyler since the hamburger joint in Sunapee in 1969, told WBUR in Boston a few months later, "I have spent a lot of time with Steven and he simply doesn't want to tour and can't tour. It's hard." 12 words. No rhetoric, no drama. Just one man talking about his brother who had lost the most precious thing the two had ever shared. The screaming motif completed its circle here. The scream began in 1964 when a teenager in Yonkers first opened his mouth on a club stage and felt the world listen. The scream ended in 2023 when a 75-year-old man opened his mouth on a Long Island stage and felt something inside break that would never heal. The man who had spent half a century creating noise was now learning how to exist in silence. November 1973. Julia Holcomb was 16 years old. Steven Tyler was 25 years old. They met backstage at an Aerosmith concert in Portland, Oregon. Holcomb was a teenage girl from a difficult family background. Tyler was the lead singer of a rising rock band using cocaine and heroin daily. According to the lawsuit, Holcomb filed many decades later, and according to Tyler's own words in his memoir, what happened next unfolded as follows. Tyler took Holcomb back to the hotel room after the show. He asked her age. He asked why she was out alone at night and where her parents were. She told him about the difficult situation at home. After that night, Tyler contacted Holcomb's mother and convinced her to sign papers transferring guardianship of the girl to him. He told the family that he would send her to school and provide medical care. In his 2011 memoir, Does the Noise in My Head Bother You, Tyler wrote about the incident without naming Holcomb. He admitted she was 16. He admitted that seeking guardianship had a specific purpose, so he wouldn't get arrested when taking her across state lines. Indirect quote from the memoir. Her parents loved him, signed the guardianship papers so he wouldn't get arrested if he took her out of state, and he took her on tour with him. He also wrote that he almost married an underage bride. The facts according to the lawsuit. Tyler did not fulfill his promises to the Holcomb family. He did not send her to school. He took her on tour, lived with her in Boston, and provided her with alcohol and drugs. She was a minor under his legal guardianship. He was an adult with full control. The power imbalance between a 25-year-old nationally famous rock singer using heavy drugs and a 16-year-old girl from an unstable family background was impossible to balance no matter what concept of consent was invoked. In 1975, Holcomb became pregnant. According to her account, Tyler initially wanted the child and proposed marriage. Then he changed his mind. Holcomb alleged that Tyler pressured her into an abortion when she was 17, after the apartment he arranged for her caught fire, and she nearly died from smoke inhalation. After the abortion, Holcomb left Tyler, returned to Portland, became a Catholic, got married, had 7 children, and buried the memories for many decades. She intended never to bring it up again until Tyler published his memoir in 2011. The book described the relationship with an underage girl through a lens that the later lawsuit described as romanticizing the abuse and thrust Holcomb into unwanted notoriety without her consent. Her name appeared in the acknowledgments section of the book, though misspelled, but enough to destroy the anonymity she had tried to maintain for 35 years. In December 2022, Holcomb, now named Julia Misley after marriage, filed a lawsuit in Los Angeles Superior Court accusing Tyler of sexual assault, sexual battery, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The lawsuit quoted directly from Tyler's memoir as evidence. The lawsuit was filed under California's 2019 law that opened a 3-year window for child sexual abuse cases that had passed the statute of limitations. Tyler denied all allegations. In court filings, he presented 2 arguments. First, Holcomb had consented to the sexual relationship. Second, he had immunity as her legal guardian at the time of the events. The second argument shocked the public because it essentially admitted to a sexual relationship with a minor while he was her guardian, while using the Vigri guardianship, designed to protect children, as a legal shield against child abuse allegations. Less than a year later, in November 2023, a second woman filed a lawsuit. Jean Bellino, a former young model, accused Tyler of sexually assaulting her in the summer of 1975 in Manhattan when she was 17 and he was 27. According to the lawsuit, Bellino met Tyler through a friend while modeling in New York. While walking on 6th Avenue, Tyler pulled her into a public phone booth, forcibly kissed and groped her. The lawsuit states that members of Tyler's entourage stood outside the phone booth and laughed. No one intervened, while passers-by witnessed it. Bellino alleged Tyler assaulted her a second time at the Warwick Hotel later that same day. This narrative has no jurisdiction and no intention of judging Tyler guilty or innocent. That is for the court. But there are facts that do not depend on the court's verdict. Tyler himself admitted in his own memoir many core details that the lawsuits allege: the girl's age, the seeking of guardianship, the purpose of seeking guardianship, and the sexual relationship with the person he was guardian of. Tyler was not a unique case. 1970s rock and roll culture was filled with relationships between adult rock stars and underage girls, given the normalized name groupie. But providing context is not to excuse. It is to show that this was a systemic issue of which Tyler was a part, not an exception, and that an era normalizing certain behavior does not make that behavior acceptable. The court will render its verdict. History will render history's verdict. What cannot be denied is that the man who sang "Janny's Got a Gun" the song about an abused child picking up a gun against the one who destroyed her childhood. The song that brought Aerosmith their first Grammy in 1990. That man carried a relationship with the theme of child abuse far more complicated than what his lyrics ever acknowledged. Steven Tyler has 4 children with 3 women. Liv, born July 1, 1977. Mother is former Playboy model B. Buell. Mia, born December 22, 1978. Mother is model Serinda Fox, Tyler's first wife. Chelsea, born March 6, 1989. And Taj, born in 1991, both children of Teresa Barrick, his second wife. 4 children, 3 mothers, 2 divorces, and 1 father absent in different ways in each child's life. But no absence left a deeper wound than the story of Liv. When Liv was born, B. Buell made a decision she kept secret for over a decade. She told musician Todd Rundgren, with whom she was living, that he was the baby's father. Rundgren signed the birth certificate and raised Liv as his own. Buell hid the biological father's identity not out of hatred, but out of fear. Tyler at that time was so deep in heroin and cocaine that no one dared place a newborn baby in his hands. For 11 years, Liv grew up believing Todd Rundgren was her father. Then in August 1988, her mother took the 11-year-old to see an Aerosmith and Guns N' Roses concert. Backstage, Liv met Mia, Tyler's daughter, with Serinda Fox, born less than 18 months after her. The 2 girls looked so alike that it could not be explained by coincidence. Liv recounted in the Sibling Revelry podcast. I looked at my mom and asked, "Mom?" And my mom started sobbing. I asked, "Is Steven my dad?" Buell took her daughter to a bench outside the venue and finally told the truth. In one night, Liv had 2 fathers. She later said she was excited to have 2 fathers so different. But as she grew up, the excitement gave way to more complicated questions. Liv confessed she needed therapy. As you get older, life starts to form and then you realize, wait, I need to deal with this. It was Tyler's own rehab process that opened the door for this father-daughter relationship. Part of the 12-step program is making amends to those who have been hurt, and Tyler began reaching out to Buell after many years of absence. Liv told Wonderland magazine in 2011, "After we met, he started calling and we would visit. He had just gotten out of rehab, so part of the recovery process was making amends by reaching back out to my mom after many years of being an addict and never being around. He had never met me before." Tyler was not a perfect father when he returned. He was a father learning how to be a father from scratch at age 40. But the 2 slowly built a relationship, and 10 years later that relationship converged in a moment the whole world witnessed without understanding its full depth. In 1998, Steven Tyler sang "I Don't Want to Miss a Thing" for the movie Armageddon, while on screen his own daughter, Liv Tyler, played the girl who had to say goodbye to the father who sacrificed his life. He sang "I Don't Want to Miss a Thing," and every note carried the weight of 11 years missed, 11 birthdays absent, 11 years his daughter called another man dad. Millions heard the song as a love ballad, but it was a confession, a promise, and an apology all at once. While Liv found her father at age 11, Mia lost her mother when she was young. Serinda Foxy divorced Tyler in 1987, published the memoir Dream On. Livin' on the Edge with Steven Tyler and Aerosmith, then passed away in 2002 from a brain tumor at age 52. Mia grew up with divorced parents when she was 9, a heavily addicted father throughout her childhood, then lost her mother when she was just over 20. Tyler celebrated her birth with the song Mia on the 1979 album Night in the Ruts, but a song does not replace presence. Chelsea and Taj, the 2 children from the second marriage, represent the period when Tyler was more sober. Chelsea was introduced by mutual friend Zoe Kravitz to actor John Foster, married in 2015, and together founded the band Canehauler. Taj lives the most private life among the 4 siblings. Both grew up under better circumstances than Liv and Mia, but the divorce from Teresa Barrick in 2006 showed that even the most stable period was not permanent. Tyler told GQ in 2019 about what he could lose if he relapsed. "The band is still together, everyone is healthy. And that's what's in danger if I use again. And my kids, my cat, my dog, my house in Maui, my girlfriend, everything is being threatened." Steven Tyler did not lose his children the way he lost his voice, suddenly, violently, irreversibly. He lost them slowly in the gaps on the edges of a life swallowed by music and addiction, and he won them back in the same way, slowly, imperfectly, every day. At age 78, Steven Tyler exists in a space few legends have ever had to learn to inhabit, the gap between who he once was and who he was forced to become. The voice is broken. The tour is canceled, the stage is dark, but he has not disappeared. By his side for more than 10 years now is Amy Preston, former personal assistant turned girlfriend, the woman 39 years his junior, whom he began dating around 2014. Unlike Serinda Foxy and Teresa Barrick, Tyler did not marry Preston. After 2 marriages that ended in divorce, perhaps he learned that he didn't need paperwork to keep someone by his side. Or perhaps he learned that no paperwork can keep anyone if everything else collapses. The relationship lasting more than 10 years without a wedding is the closest thing to stability Steven Tyler has ever achieved in his romantic life. In the final years of his career and after retirement, Tyler devoted a significant portion of his time and name to Janie's Fund, the charity he founded through the Youth Villages organization to support abused and abandoned girls. The name comes from the song Janie's Got a Gun, the song about a child abused by her biological father that earned him a Grammy in 1990. This is a detail that carries weight that this script acknowledges but does not attempt to resolve. The man with the Julia Holcomb past, the man facing 2 lawsuits for sexual assault of underage girls, is spending his final years helping the very group of victims he is accused of having harmed. That contradiction may be a sign of genuine redemption, or it may be something else. The answer belongs to each viewer, not this script. 6 months after Aerosmith announced retirement on February 2, 2025, Tyler stepped onto the stage at the Hollywood Palladium in Los Angeles during the Jam for Janie Grammy Awards viewing party. He sang a cover of Extreme's More Than Words with Mick Fleetwood and Nuno Bettencourt, then performed Toys in the Attic and Dream On, the song he wrote as a teenager in Yonkers more than half a century earlier. His voice was different. Smaller, thinner, more fragile, no longer the sky-tearing scream that defined the Demon of Screamin nickname. But it was still his voice. And the audience wasn't there for perfect vocal technique. They were there because they wanted to be near the man who had given them 50 years of music, and to hear him sing with whatever was left. 7 months later, on September 7, 2025, Tyler returned in front of millions of television viewers at the MTV VMAs. He performed Mama, I'm Coming Home to honor the late Ozzy Osbourne alongside Joe Perry, Youngblood, and Nuno Bettencourt. The larynx was broken. The voice was no longer what it used to be. But he still stood there, on stage, in front of the cameras, refusing to leave. The Demon of Screamin could no longer scream but refused to be silent. Perry told WBUR in Boston that he didn't think Tyler would tour again, but added one sentence that fans clung to like a final thread. I bet there's one more Aerosmith show. There are talks about doing a documentary. Maybe it will be part of that. Not a tour. Not 40 nights. Just one moment. A door cracked open just enough for the light to come through. Steven Tyler at age 78 carries the marks of everything he has lived through. His hair is still long but thinner. His face is carved by 50 years of rock and roll, addiction, hepatitis C, chemotherapy, 4 rehabs, 2 divorces, and a broken larynx. His body can no longer jump like those nights at Madison Square Garden or Budokan. But Tyler doesn't try to look younger or hide his age. He wears those years on him like another stage costume, openly, unapologetically, without explanation. He belongs to the last group of an era that is closing. Mick Jagger at 83, still on stage, but not forever. Keith Richards at 82, Robert Plant at 77. Ozzy Osbourne is gone. The generation when rock and roll was religion, and rock stars were both saints and sinners is leaving the stage one by one. And each time one leaves, the world loses another piece of something that can never be recreated. Tyler is one of the last ones still standing, even if standing with a broken larynx and a body that has literally betrayed him in every part. The stage is darker now, the crowds are quieter. The voice that once shook stadiums now struggles to fill a room. But somewhere inside the 78-year-old man with the broken larynx, the boy in Yonkers who first screamed into the microphone and felt the world finally listen is still there. Steven Tyler is not a perfect rock god or a tragic cautionary tale. He is both at the same time in the same person, and it is precisely the inseparability of those two extremes that is his true legacy. The man who once received standing ovations from 80,000 people is also the man who once sat in the Betty Ford rehab room, shaking, starting over from zero. The writer of Johnny's Got a Gun, the song about the destruction of child abuse, is also the man sued for his behavior with underage girls in the 1970s. The greatest voice of his generation is also the voice permanently silenced by his own body at age 75. There is no way to resolve these contradictions into a neat conclusion, and this script does not try. But there are things that do not depend on court verdicts or public opinion. Steven Tyler changed rock and roll permanently. He proved that a band could die and come back stronger when Aerosmith resurrected in the 1980s after nearly a decade of devastating addiction. He proved that rock could meet hip-hop and both could grow when Walk This Way with Run DMC broke down the wall separating two music worlds in 1986. He proved that a rock star could be sober and still great, shattering the lie that creativity needs drugs with the very best albums of his career written when he had no heroin in his veins. In an era of music that is increasingly mechanized, increasingly edited through software and algorithms, Tyler reminds us that rock and roll is first and last about raw, unprocessed emotion, without permission, without apology. The Demon of Screamin can no longer scream. The broken larynx has silenced the voice that once shook stadiums on 6 continents. But the scream was never just about volume. It was about a boy in Yonkers, expelled from Roosevelt High School, belonging nowhere except under the stage lights, discovering that if he screamed loud enough, the world would stop and listen. The world listened for 50 years. And now, in the silence that follows, what remains is not the sound but the feeling that sound left behind. Tyler stands on stage at age 78, the microphone in his hand, the scarves still hanging on the mic stand, but silent, no screaming, just standing there. And that presence, wordless, musicless, screamless, is still enough to fill the room. When you think of Steven Tyler, what comes first? The screams, the scarves, the music, or the man behind it all? Share your answer in the comments below, and join us in honoring the voice that made the world feel something it never named. If this story touched you, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next stories about the legends who changed the world. Thank you for staying until the very end. See you in the next video.